Yeah.
All right. Ready? So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join today's Business Roundtable. We really appreciate the opportunity to connect with our business owners in town. And this is really intended to be a two-way conversation, not just the town sharing updates, but really hearing from the business concerns of the community. And so we're ramping these up, trying to continue to grow participation. And so would ask that you tell other business owners so they can join us in the future, but just want to thank you for taking the time to join us today and hope that the information that we are able to provide, particularly from our presenter today, will be of tremendous value to you. So with that, I will turn things back over to our town administrator, Ms. Bailey Hedgepeth.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. This is as the mayor said, this is an opportunity that we try to make sure that we held at least quarterly with business owners so that we can touch base. We have a presenter today, John Parks, and he's from Maryland National Park and Planning, the Prince George's County Planning Department. Jared is our economic development manager. He's also here as well, and I think you may have met him before. I've got Acting Chief Fishcorn sitting next to me, Sean Reinhardt from our code enforcement, and Ray, our all-around marketing specialist and just resident jack of all trades, is also here today. So from the staff standpoint, that's what we're here to answer your questions. We would love to go around the table, kind of let everybody introduce themselves. And again, and the staff, you guys introduce yourselves as well. I just didn't want to make it like silly. So why don't we start this way? Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andre Downey. I'm the general manager of Sandow Construction.
Susan McCutcheon, I'm the secretary treasurer of We Lead nonprofit. We Lead by Example Inc. It partners with the town and does various community activities in addition to teaching martial arts.
I'm Roger, go by Sean Reinhardt. I'm the code enforcement supervisor in the town of Bladensburg. Kind of a little bit of a town historian.
Dan Frischkorn, I'm the current acting chief of the police department and been with the town for a couple of years.
And yeah, I'm Michelle Bailey Hedgepeth. I'm the town administrator.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ray Jeffries. I'm the marketing specialist for the town of Williamsburg.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jared Hawkins, and I lead the economic development in the town.
Lorraine Griffin, library staff, Bladensburg Library, Prince George's County Memorial Library System.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Parks. I'm with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. With the Prince George's County Planning Department, I am one of the staff planners for the housing team. It's me and my fantastic supervisor, Karen Moreau. We lead the housing initiatives for the planning department, and just want to say really excited to give our presentation on missing middle housing and a number of other initiatives that we have going on in the planning department. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, thank you, John. And so part of today's on the agenda, we have this, the mayor made our remarks. What I was gonna do is let John do his presentation, and then Jared, that way you can kind of like, then come back afterwards and kind of talk about and lead the economic development discussion. So, John, and I'll give you a kind of a little build up, John, so that you can get yourself all settled. I heard about the missing middle housing project probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And the one thing that's really interesting about it is that as we look at young people and not even so young people, affordability is a big issue here in the DMV and probably more also around the country. What the missing middle housing study and what the work that our planning department has been doing has been talking about the type of development that we need to be working on that would support people to have entry-level housing. That's not always about buying, but it's also about renting, and it's about places that they can live for a lifetime, and make communities their home versus kind of, floating from one area to the other. So I think it's really important that we will, that we have this conversation and I applaud Jared for sort of bringing in some different topics for us to look at. And then we can also talk about how this affects the business community. I think I've wound it up enough for John so that he can start his presentation. John, the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I just want to thank Mayor James and Michelle and the entire town of Bladensburg again for having me. Really excited to be here. And Jared, thank you for putting this all together. It's this, this is exciting work, in the planning department, myself and Karen, this is our passion. So, any opportunity to talk about this is something that we enjoy. And the first step in talking about housing, because this is the cornerstone of our communities, is ensuring that we are talking with our municipalities. Planning department, that is our biggest priority, is making sure that the folks living in our municipalities are informed of what we're doing and are able to participate in this work, because it does affect, everyone in the county, and we want to make sure that everyone's voices are incorporated into any housing work that we do. So this is a brief presentation. It'll take about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes. I'll try to touch on some topics that are definitely of importance to the business community, but give an overview of what missing middle housing is, the history behind it, what the county is doing around this study, and then afterwards open it up for just the general questions and answers about this. So with that, you can go ahead and get started. So the Housing Work Program is located within Community Planning Division and specifically within the Neighborhood Revitalization Section, or NRS. And as Michelle touched on, the idea to bring missing middle housing to NRS began in 2020 with the idea of exploring new housing types. And when we began our evaluation and initial development of the full scope, it became clear that our team had to take a much more comprehensive approach to the topic in order to make it both effective and implementable. And our research has shown that it is critical to develop an affirmative missing middle housing program to respond to the housing needs of the county. We believe the missing middle housing program fits well within the neighborhood revitalization section, as housing is the foundation of the neighborhood and often the sustaining driver of revitalization and community strength. And with this context, we'll like to present our initial understandings and findings of missing middle housing and why there is a need for a diversity of housing choices in Prince George's County and our approach to expanding attainable housing options for the county's residents. So throughout this presentation, you'll hear several housing specific terms, and many of them are used interchangeably, and they are workforce or attainable housing. And here in Prince George's County, housing that is affordable for households. This is housing that's affordable for households earning between $80,000 and $118,000. So this is firefighters, police officers, nurses, teachers, critical members of the workforce in the county. And especially I want to dive into the term affordability. And when we talk about housing affordability, we're talking about housing that is affordable to whatever household's income may be. Affordable housing is housing that is built with or provided government subsidies, which can carry certain income restrictions. But we're talking about housing affordability. So housing that's attainable to those folks earning between $80,000 and $118,000 in Prince George's County. And the big one is missing middle housing, or MMH. And it's referring to housing types that exist across a broad spectrum of design and form. So these various types by nature can fit seamlessly into existing neighborhoods on the fabric of neighborhood blocks. And these types are often seen in older urbanized neighborhoods built before the 1940s. And, as I was driving into the town, you can see a lot of these types. We just don't know what to call them. These are housing types, and I'll expand it a little bit, that are between 2 and 10 units, are more dense, built on smaller parcels. They exist in our neighborhoods. We've just lost the capacity to build newer types of these missing middle housing types. And so this is a great diagram that demonstrates the diversity of missing middle housing types between single family detached on the left-hand side of the screen and higher intensity multi-unit buildings shown in white on the other end of the barbell. So those either ends, we have a lot of that in the county. We have a lot of single family detached housing, and we have a lot of high-rise multifamily. So think of, College Park is a great example. There's been a lot of construction around those high-rise multi-unit properties. And missing middle housing is called middle because the form and scale and density are somewhere between single family homes and those high-rise apartment buildings. These types are called missing because in many communities, Modern zoning and development regulations have made them illegal to build in the United States since the 1940s. And also, as I previously mentioned, middle can refer to the price point of these housing types. They're affordable to middle income residents who earn between 80 and 120% of the area median income. So that 80,000 to 118,000 in income per year. It is important to note that this is market rate housing, which is more affordable to middle income families. Missing middle housing types function best when located in a walkable context with access to amenities and services. These housing types can secure and promote a well-connected development pattern, which makes walking and biking easier, safer, and convenient, as well as advancing access to public transportation and supporting other infrastructure investments through an increased tax base. And now I think this is particularly relevant to members of the business community because there's multiple studies showing that increased walk scores, walkability is a premium for the next generation of county residents and actually has, increasing impact on sales revenue. People, enjoying a walkable, amenity-rich environment are more likely to spend money at businesses, are more likely to eat out. I'll go into a little bit of the market economics later in the presentation, but the context of these housing types is critical to supporting greater economic vitality. So the form and design of each missing middle housing type will vary depending upon the local context, but all missing middle housing types share the same core characteristics. Height is generally about 1 to 2.5 stories. Most missing middle housing types will have 2 to 9 units in a building. They have smaller footprints and the units tend to be more compact, with the typical size being approximately 600 to 1,200 square feet. These smaller spaces are well designed, comfortable, and usable. Smaller size units can help developers keep their costs down and attract a different market of buyers and renters to all neighborhoods. But the most important characteristic of missing middle housing types is that they have the form and scale of a single family house. These types can blend seamlessly into neighborhoods and the density is perceived to be lower than it is. And so these are a number of examples from across the country, ranging from the Pacific Northwest in the top right corner, to kind of a side-by-side duplex in the Baltimore area. So these housing types exist across the nation and are adaptable to their local context depending on where they are. So this density comparison image highlights the uniqueness of missing middle housing. The residential properties share similar density, but the scale and form of the building on the right may be more readily embraced by the wider community. And so to give a little bit of the background of how we got to this housing crisis in the county, on the left is a photo of Bel Air at Bowie, and this was a Levittown that was built in Bowie. This community was developed at a time when single-family zoning and investment had its greatest impact in the suburban boom that took place in the decades after World War II. And fueled by generous loans guaranteed by the Federal Housing Administration and the Veterans Administration, Bel Air took the form of single-family homes on individual lots, the overwhelming choice for Americans moving to the suburbs. And developers catered to this preference. And with the encouragement and approval of the federal government, developers such as William Levitt explicitly barred people of color and some religions from buying into these subdivisions. This and other inequitable practices like redlining and restrictive covenants fostered long-lasting patterns of racial segregation and discrimination in the housing market well after the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1960. So we really see this topic is not only talking about the future of development in the county, this is a topic around equity in the county and how do we want to see a more equitable housing future for the residents of the county. So in its equity and zoning policy guide, the American Planning Association recognizes how zoning regulations had a disproportionate exclusionary impact on communities throughout the US. This occurred by intentionally segregating Americans by race and socioeconomic class. And one consequence was the elimination of essentially all housing types except two: large family multifamily developments and single family detached structures. And while regulatory zoning in the US has evolved, it hasn't by much. Remains a barrier to missing middle housing types, as today's zoning and land use policies everywhere restrict them from being built in most areas of the country. Prince George's County is no exception. Currently, single-family zoning comprises 94% of residential development. And while the new zoning code has provided added flexibility in housing types allowed, it still may not support the diverse range of housing that Prince George's County will need. So this is a ton of information, but I'll go through it quickly. And although diverse types exist in older neighborhoods like Bladensburg and other municipalities in the county, development regulations have largely prohibited greater expansion of missing middle housing types in areas that they would be best suited. And this table illustrates the zoning districts that can potentially support missing middle housing. Those areas that do allow for the full spectrum of missing middle housing types will likely encourage more intense development that is greater than the house scale buildings that we would hope to produce. You'll see that some zones allow for certain missing middle housing types, but with each zone, there are overall issues regarding building height limits and open space requirements, lot sizes and widths, and allowed density is oftentimes much too low to support missing middle housing. So we're going to talk about a few trends, particularly within the housing market, that impact the county. So as I briefly mentioned before, this slide shows the average income for several different types of workers in the region. The red line shows the income needed to afford the median priced home for sale in the county, which is well over $420,000. And the yellow line shows the income to afford median rent in the county, which is over $1,700. This table demonstrates that critical employees to the local and regional economy clearly do not earn enough to live in the county. Missing middle housing types provide housing opportunities for these crucial middle income earners like teachers, firefighters, tradespeople, and other essential workers. And in many cases, those workers may not be considered low income and will not qualify for any kind of subsidies in their housing. Yet these workers may be unable to afford market rate housing expenses in Prince George's County. And I just want to reiterate this point that Prince George's County is losing population to our surrounding counties because of this reason. Because many folks can't afford to live in the county, we are losing those critical workforce, critical members of the workforce to places like Charles County, Montgomery County, Frederick County, even outside of the state of Maryland. And so housing is expensive. I know I don't have to say that because many of us know. Many people are living in units that are more affordable than what they can technically afford because of this reason. They may seek lower priced housing in order to pay for other necessities like retirement, like food, like anything that you could imagine. And this image demonstrates that there's a downward market pressure on lower income households due to this insufficient housing at all income categories. As well, rents and home prices have been rising faster than income in the US for the past 2 decades. For many households, increasing housing costs means that there's less to spend on other necessities, like I was just saying, food, education, healthcare, and retirement savings. And particularly for younger Americans, high costs may be preventing them from living on their own or forming new households entirely. And while the magnitude of these effects resonate for so many, housing cost burden is felt inequitably and are particularly severe for households of color, lower and middle income households, and renters. A household is considered cost burdened if it is paying more than 30% of its income on housing related expenses, including mortgage payments or rent, utilities, taxes, and insurance. And in Prince George's County, 72% of our renters are considered cost burden, and over a third of homeowners are as well. And one interesting trend to note that in the years since we've started collecting this data, the share of renter and homeowner cost burden households has grown from 54% to renters and 29% for homeowners. So this is only increasing more as time goes on. So increased competition for limited housing supply drives up housing prices for everyone. And in 2023, there were slightly over 350,000 housing units in the county. And of that number, only 1,200 were new construction. which is substantially fewer than the annual production target to meet the current housing demand. So not only will we need to produce more housing to meet demand, Prince George's County will need to produce housing that reflects the needs of new households, accommodates future growth, and diverse housing preferences. And in reflecting these arrangements, the typical family arrangement that I'll say that was evident during that great suburban boom that I talked about is changing. There are more multi-generational families. There are more single household families. The demographics of our family compositions are changing, yet our housing stock does not reflect that. And so we need to create a solution which reflects the needs of a changing county, composition. And so, as I stated, in the county, we have a substantial amount of single-family homes, both detached residences and detached townhomes. We have large-scale multi-unit opportunities, but largely only in high-intensity apartment buildings or condominiums. Over the last decade, the number of new single-family units has significantly outpaced other types of development. And what's missing is middle housing, smaller buildings with 2 to 9 units located in structures that fit into the scale and form of existing neighborhoods. These missing units are often less expensive, and their market value for purchase or rent can be lower due to decreased construction costs. The lack of missing middle housing inventory and overall new construction of housing types drives up housing costs for everyone in the county. And our county general plan recognizes this challenge, and it says that Prince George's County is not prepared to meet the housing preferences of many of its seniors and young professionals, and this impairs our economic competitiveness in the region. And so we're going to go into a little bit more of the benefits of missing middle housing and what that could mean for the county. So missing middle housing types have a multitude of economic benefits. These types offer a pathway to home ownership for a greater number of people. Government-backed home loans can be used to purchase missing middle housing types with as little as a 3.5% down payment. And in many cases, the owner of a missing middle housing type will occupy one unit, while the rental income, the remaining unit or units, supports the mortgage payment for that entire property. And missing middle housing types offer an opportunity for wealth building and generational wealth building, and can lead to more stable and economically resilient communities. And as I mentioned before, well-designed missing middle buildings blend seamlessly into the existing neighborhood fabric, unifying the streetscape of low-rise residential neighborhoods, and can transition between those single-family structures and higher intensity mixed use or transit corridors. Missing middle housing types also supports mixed income communities, which are important to the economic stability of a community. And researchers actually at the Brookings Institute found that retail sales correlated with walkability. And for each increase in the walkability scale of the neighborhood, a store in that neighborhood was likely to see almost an 80% gain in retail sales. And thriving businesses, as we all know, in turn increase the job availability in the neighborhoods that these missing middle housing types are located. And as well, different types of households have more public presence throughout a day, and there are more eyes on the street where walking is appealing and safe. So not only can missing middle housing types and the context around them increase the economic competitiveness of an area, it can also increase the safety in an area because you have more people walking around, you have those eyes on the street, and it creates a more lively streetscape that can actually be safer for the entire community. So we're fortunate to have an extensive and still growing body of work to look at as we develop our own initiative. Municipalities, planners, realtors, economists, architects from around the country have been exploring the concept of missing middle housing, particularly as a way to address the housing shortage. And it's important to mention that AARP has also notably become a large advocate and a very active advocate for missing middle housing types for its seniors. And one of the common themes among much of this research is that missing middle housing type is all about price, size, and location. And in order for people to reduce cost of living while still living in the areas of choice, the areas where they want, smaller units in walkable neighborhoods with access to transit, jobs, and basic amenities are needed. So this is just a couple of, news articles and publications regarding the importance of missing middle housing and particularly the importance of this type of housing in the DMV region. So each approach that we've studied is a little different and uniquely tailored to the local and regional conditions and needs present. These include missing middle housing studies, guides, toolkits, and pattern books. They're all data-driven and largely based around three main elements. Research, so housing surveys and needs assessments, design, so housing types and architectural pattern books, and regulatory analysis, so looking at our development regulations, our zoning ordinance, and seeing what works and what doesn't. And local governments are trying to encourage developers to build more missing middle housing by removing these barriers versus requiring its development and relying on subsidy for housing production. So a crucial first step in this effort was to draft a mission statement to help guide the development and implementation of a missing middle housing program. And it reads as follows. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll let you know. So our approach is about outreach. So events like this. We also have an evolving website and we'll continue to provide outreach opportunities to hear from you, share what we are learning, and work together to create a better and more inclusive housing future. So in light of this, the planning department has begun a missing middle housing study to explore strategies to achieve a greater diversity of attainable and market rate housing options to meet the needs of Prince George's County growing and diverse population. And together with Opticos Design Incorporated, they're the firm which pioneered this idea. And please check out their website. They're a great partner in this effort. And they've assisted other jurisdictions across the nation, and we're also receiving support from the firm ACOM, which is a local regional partner, and they're assisting in this effort as well. But the planning department will engage the community to gather perspectives on housing, which will address the needs of an increasing population, driving those economic opportunities, and enriching the unique identities of our communities and municipalities, and support more sustainable growth. And we aim to make this initiative and other housing projects accessible to public officials and members of the public and our municipalities, because this is truly a collaborative effort. And we want to make sure that that is interwoven throughout the entirety of this study and all of the housing work that we do. So we will be conducting very proactive outreach around this. So this is truly a paradigm shift that urges all of us, elected officials, policymakers, planners, architects, builders, to rethink the way housing is designed, located, and developed. So many of us want and need more diverse housing choices and walkable neighborhoods, homes that are attainable, sustainable, and thoughtfully designed. It's important to keep in mind that a missing middle housing initiative of this nature and in this context has not been done in the county. And we have an opportunity to lead the way for other communities facing similar housing issues. And a successful missing middle housing initiative in the county will not only have lasting benefits for our communities, but can make us more resilient in the face of changing demographics and housing preferences, a changing economy, and climate change as well. So thank you so much for your time. I know that was a lot of information. I've put out some informational pamphlets on missing middle housing. But if there's any questions, I think we can kind of move into, general Q&A. Oh, as well, I'd be remiss to not mention, please feel free to scan that QR code. We're conducting a housing survey, and we want to know, your current housing situation that you're facing if you're a resident of the county, what you want to see, any input that you have that we can take to the planning department and really incorporate it into our study. So again, thank you so much for your time and happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
What are what's the sale price range of these homes?
Yeah, so the sale price range will be, again, for that income band between folks earning $80,000 up to $110,000. So this is workforce housing. This is, you know, kind of some examples that I gave. Folks who are teachers, firefighters, you know, construction workers, tradespeople. And again, it's important to note that these housing types are not, this is market rate housing. This is not housing that receives any kind of government subsidy. It could, but for the purposes of our study, this is market rate housing. And the way that it's kept more affordable is an example. Let's say what's common in the county is tear down of an existing single family home and building a new single family home. So tear down and rebuild. That new home could get sold for $400,000 because that's an example price of, you know, what a single family home could cost. Now, if that were to occur with a missing middle housing type, let's say a duplex is built that looks like a single family home. It has all the bells and whistles, backyard, front yard, all that good stuff that people love about a single family home, but there's 2 units. So you can divide that home price, that sale price into 2 because there's 2 units. So each price could go for $200,000 and they could still fit the needs of the county, or I'm sorry, the needs of prospective buyers, you know, as like we were talking about, there's those changing demographics. So somebody could say, I don't mind living in a smaller unit if it's located near my place of work, near the metro, near a shopping center, near things that I like to walk to and do. So it's the design is how it's kept more affordable rather than receiving any kind of government assistance to keep it affordable.
Gotcha.
So John, the difference like between like what we see currently in the market when you see like a 3-story up and down with the garage on the bottom, you know,
Like a
townhouse, the townhome
Sure.
that we see a lot, like when you see new development that's coming up in the county and that always is starting at $500,000-$600,000 because based on the square footage and size, even 20 years ago, the sizes were maybe maxing out at maybe 22,000, 2,500. Now they're like 3,500. How is the county incentivizing, let's say 1,000 square feet or 1,500 square feet? Like, I know as part of it that you're saying those are the sizes that we need, or we need the courtyard style. But like, I mean, what's the hammer or legislative way that we're gonna get at this? Because it's kind of like the funding thing, because private developers, if they have a choice to develop a 3,000 square foot or a 1,200 square foot, they're gonna always choose the one that's gonna bring them more profit onto it. I mean, I remember that when I moved to Champaign, I bought a unit that was a 1,000 square feet. But it was looks in the same townhouse, but it was 3 units that were, you know, I had the one half the garage, my other person had the other one, and they lived above me and I lived below. And in some ways, that's the missing middle, right? Because I was a single person, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. I mean, it was a nice signal, but it would have fit in this band. And that doesn't exist right now. In this county from the standpoint of a decent, you know, so it looks like what the market looks like, but it's separated out into affordable. And I think at the time it was $100,000 in year 2000 for it, right? I paid 102 for a brand new unit. You can't do that anymore. Poor Ray can't do that. And that's the issue. It's like that, you know, even if we doubled it now, it would make, even if that unit cost $200,000, it would still be more affordable to that firefighter, cop, teacher, Ray. And from the standpoint that we could be able to make that first purchase, because in some ways that's what rent is, you know, and then he could rent the 2nd bedroom to a friend or whatever, you know. But I'm just wondering, how is MMPCC handling that particular issue of talking to developers, looking at parcels? Because I look at Bladensburg and we are kind of doing that. Like, you're seeing ADUs in this area, right? You have people with, and those are additional dwelling units. In, you know, behind, so they're converting garages, they're doing that. So you see that here. I think that the inner beltway is really embracing it. How do we get the entire county, you know, and Bowie and other places to embrace the fact that they need smaller units, not everybody doesn't have to have a 6,000 square foot house to be a successful person in this area.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it's definitely one of those things we can have both.
Right.
You know, it's about promoting that diversity. And from conversations that we've had, a component of this study has been focus groups. We've been having a number of focus groups with homeowners associations, civic groups, developers, elected officials, you know, everyone that we can talk to and say, hey, what are the issues that you are seeing that we could seek to address? And from the perspective of the development community, I think a lot of what they're seeing is timelines. It's very hard and lengthy to develop in the county. And because of that, they seek to maximize their housing that they can be built on the land that they own. So a part of this study is looking at where we can revise our regulations to encourage or make it easier for people to develop at a smaller scale. On a single parcel, you know, if there's a vacant lot and a home could be built on, what can we do to make it easier for folks to build on a vacant lot or to build on a smaller parcel that the big townhome developers may not be interested in?
Right.
And so it's, I do think a lot of it is about how we can look at the way we regulate development. Because it takes a long time. I think in the county, it takes approximately 2 to 3 years to build, you know, these types of townhomes. And at that point, a developer could have $2 or $3 million invested.
Right.
So there's an incentive to how much can we build on our land that we own, which lends itself to.
I mean, it's like, when you're looking here in the inner beltway, I mean, looking in Williamsburg, you know, Como, Manor, City, and the port towns, we don't have a lot of infill lots, and then those infill lots are $500,000 or $600,000 just to buy them.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, is that you've then just upped the ante for the developer because they're paying a great deal for that single family lot or a couple single family lots. And then that's why we get apartments. Like, that's why you get, you know, a large apartment with live work. And if it were, you know, like, I mean, like, if you look at some of the newer construction, North Brentwood and things like that, it's not going to be that because they're buying it at, I mean, the lot itself is cost. So I was wondering if, you know, how do we address those market forces? Or the county is saying, okay, we own X number of pieces of land that are not being utilized, and we're going to change those. Cause I mean, I know in the city of Miami, when I was there, that they made an effort in Miami in the early 2000s, late 90s, before it even got really crazy, to take portions of land that the city owned and make them into affordable housing for people that were targeted at no more than 1,200 square feet. Small family houses, which are now $1 million, because people can kind of sell them because they've been in the period of time that they've had them for 20 years, right? But they couldn't sell them for 20 years. But these were homes that they built in the city of Miami, right off of US 1, that are beautiful homes that are now, you know, that people now have home ownership in, that they made a commitment to that. So I don't know if, like, from the standpoint of the comments that, you know, are there pieces of land that the county can kind of put their skin behind and say, hey, we're gonna show you what this model looks like, developers. And so that we can kind of put it together, because they were, you know, that was an investment that took something from the standpoint of that the government kind of had to push it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think it's, I can't speak to what the land the county owns, that's it's
not you guys, but I'm just saying, but yeah.
But it's a great, you know, that is a critical idea. If we do have underutilized parcels that are just kind of sitting there, I think that would be a great example of a pilot project. One thing that I will note is, and they do this in Montgomery County, they have an established program called the Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit Program, and I believe Prince George's County is exploring that as well, as a way to kind of that 1-2 punch. How can we incentivize this type of construction, but how can we keep it affordable? And that's a program which will maintain the affordability of for sale homes. So that could be a great tool to augment, you know, what we do within the planning department of how we can incentivize this within our zoning and, you know, development regulations. So
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
So John had actually two questions. The first one, related to the history.
Oh, Mayor has her hand up too, just one thing.
Gotcha. Related to history, and I appreciate, you explained in post-World War II how we kind of got to this moment. I have family living all across the country, and they say like missing middle housing is less of an issue. There's duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes, and courtyard style housing. Typically, the Midwest and in the South, southern portions of the country. Is there an idea as to why those types of housing, aren't here, and how we wound up in this issue specifically in this region compared to other parts of the country? And then my second question is a little bit more simple. That study that you referenced towards the end of your presentation, do you know when it will be done? Or
Yes. Yes, I'll answer that one first. So, we're in the throes of the missing middle housing study right now as we speak. So, Karen Moreau, the project manager, and myself as the deputy project manager, we are working on that study, and we are anticipating that study to be completed by April of 2026. Now, that could be extended based on some other concepts we want to bring in. But as of now, that will be completed in the spring of 2026. And that study is looking at, the regulatory barriers to this type of housing. So looking at our zoning code, looking at our development regulations, what we're doing great, what we're doing not so great on to promote this type of housing. So that'll be finished up in the spring, and that will hopefully be followed by a pattern book. And a pattern book is like, think of it as an architectural catalog of what these designs could look like in a way that respects what the county looks like now. So what types of building materials, the design, the form, the scale to best fit into existing communities. And that will be following the study. So it'll be kind of a two-parter that we'll have for the Missing Middle Housing Initiative. And we don't have a set date on the pattern book, just because that is going to follow the study. So I don't have a date for you on that, but the study will be completed spring of 2026. And then your first question around the why we don't see this type of housing compared to other places. I think there is a divide in the county of where the inner Beltway communities do have this housing types. We have duplexes, we have live work units. So, 2 or 3 apartments above ground floor retail, Main Street America type stuff. Because those portions of Prince George's County were built before these zoning regulations were imposed that favored single family development. So a lot of that development that occurred outside of the Beltway had these zoning regulations, had these requirements for large lot sizes, favoring single family detached structures, favoring the types of development that are on either end of that barbell that I showed earlier. And so we've had that for a long time, since after post-World War II. We've been doing a lot of building in the county since that time, and it's all been within the confines of those zoning regulations. And so at this point, it's about, let's go back and to see what we were doing right before this, and how we were favoring, more dense housing construction, more dense buildings, smaller footprint homes, because that's what we had before, the great suburban boom of like the late 40s and early 50s. So, and the reason why in many cases in the South or in the Midwest, my hometown of Los Angeles, had a lot of construction in that pre-war or during the war period. A lot of missing middle housing types were built in response to worker needs. So places like Chicago, during the, kind of the industrialization the US and the massive expansion of industry in response to the war, housing was needed, and what was built was these missing middle housing types. So it's just when that expansion occurred, and what kind of regulations were existing during that expansion. And in the county was that post-World War II boom happened pretty substantially here, and it was under those zoning regulations that's why we see a lot of, those large single-family detached homes outside the Beltway particularly.
Got it. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, my question was answered along with Jared's. So just sort of trying to understand how we got to where we are currently. And then also why we don't see more innovation around things like the tiny homes and other alternatives to address first-time home buyers, or maybe older residents who still want to have their own space, not be attached to anyone per se. It's just interesting that you see that these tiny home projects taking off in other places or other markets, but not so much in Prince George's County.
Yeah, Mayor James, that's a great question. And, I'll take an opportunity to talk about, in the planning department and in our housing team, we are not just working on missing middle housing. We have a plethora of projects that we are working on and concepts that we have. And one of our ideas is a starter home and silver home initiative. Just the other week, I was at a community meeting and somebody said, my parents can't afford to downsize, which that is, in my mind, that's ludicrous. You've paid off your mortgage, you have your equity in your home, and you can't afford to sell that home and buy a smaller home that fits your needs as a senior. That's a broken housing market in my mind. And you're right that, the aging population in Prince George's County is a priority for our housing initiatives. So how can our seniors age in place? An example of that is we're doing a lot of work around accessory dwelling units. While those are not considered missing middle housing types, that's a separate program that we're working on in response to state legislation to how to permit accessory dwelling units countywide. And there's a number of examples across the country, Mayor, to your point of where, let's say you have a senior that's living in a 2-story single-family home by themselves. They've progressed in age to the point of where they can't get up the stairs anymore. In a number of examples, that homeowner can build an accessory dwelling unit, live in that accessory dwelling unit that might have some kind of accessibility feature, and either rent out the front home for supplemental income. If they're on a fixed income, they can receive that income from the front house, or have their kids live in that home and can kind of be the caretakers while having a separate space for both the seniors and the family. So we feel that, new housing types and initiatives, we need to pay particular attention to our seniors, but then as well the next generation of county residents. How can we encourage young folks? I mean, maybe a bias as I'm a young person of where, how can I afford home ownership? And how can we make sure that young folks in the next generation of county residents also have home ownership opportunities that fit their needs and price points and preferences for that matter.
Thank you, John. This has been.
Because I live in a Rambler, single home, built in 1956. They're on the road, but they've been modified,
Yeah.
In the house next door, they actually took down the chimney. I don't understand why, but anyway. But I know I get a call every day, sometimes twice a day, somebody trying to buy the house. And when I look around, as the mayor was saying about the tiny homes, it's not this is a huge home, but it's still the yard, it takes more. And if I had a tiny home that I could do more easily, with bad knees and everything, trying to get around. it would really be great, because as it is, I looked at this apartment, so I really want to move to an apartment. I can't afford an apartment. I mean, I barely do, my mortgage is less for what I can barely afford, but an apartment more so from, say, what my son pays. It's just, so this would be any kind of initiative, looking at all ends of it. And the only, I guess, benefit to say is with my house, it would be like, well, when I die, my son can have my house. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it, so for, to afford, to come into, but he should be able now to get something, like you said, he's,
Absolutely.
so,
And,
yeah.
I think the way, we can have an abundance of all types of housing in the county. I don't think that there's any reason why we can't have options that fit everyone's preferences, everyone's price points, that fit what everyone needs. We have, the ability to do that. And I think that's of critical importance to where, folks can be able to move where they want within the county. That's a big priority for us is, for example, I'll stick with seniors, where there should be housing options in your community that you know well. And there shouldn't be exclusive housing options for seniors particularly, that are, far out in the county or something like where they don't know the community that they're in. You should be able to spend your entire housing lifeline in the places that you want. And we can do that through furthering an abundance of housing options for everyone.
The other question was about equity.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's, as we know in our country, surface equity, and there's
Sure.
not really equity. How is that issue now? I was recently with the Maglev issue about how it's going through environmental justice communities and sort of and then I had learned about how in transportation, cutting right through a community, I just didn't even know about before.
Yeah.
And destroying communities and that sort of thing. What, in an honest look at the equity, what is the equity status? It might look like it's fine on the surface, but I still hear little stories about attitudes and kind of moving people like, wait, well, maybe you want to go over there. We don't want you over here. Is that something you, and I don't know, you may not know the answer to that, but I do wonder about that as well.
Absolutely. We would be having blinders on if we said that, oh, the passage of the Fair Housing Act fixed everything. That's not the reality. There's numerous examples of, for example, home appraisals, where there's appraisal bias of where you take two homeowners with the same price, but those homeowners look different and their homes are appraised at different values. And this particularly affects households of color and low-income households. So part of the way that we're seeking to advance equity within the missing middle housing study is recognizing that single-family zoning had a disproportionate effect on communities of color and barring those communities from, accessing a home ownership ladder. So we see advancing home ownership opportunities as a way to correct that wrong and a way to, make sure that folks have a dedicated ladder to build wealth, to retain that wealth. There's a lot of initiatives right now regarding heirs property, entangled titles, which disproportionately affects households of color, of where if there's no correct line of, who gets the home after the primary homeowner dies, that wealth can kind of go away. It can go to probate. It can just sort of disappear. And so how can we look at critical ways to, dismantle the structures that have disproportionately affected communities of color, within our power as the planning department and advancing equity. And we're a companion kind of different project within the neighborhood revitalization section as one of my coworkers is leading an equity and planning initiative. And, equity is a priority in our department, and we have to seek ways in order to advance that.
Well, and related that then to, this is about Bladensburg itself, when I was forced out sequestration in 2013 of my job. I had to, when I had to refinance. And at that time, they said that other areas weren't as bad, but that Bladensburg and right around were underwater. And so I had to accept a lot. It was a lot less. Is that a factor? And I've heard things like, oh, Bladensburg, no, and cheap and this and that. I've heard all sorts of stuff. Is there a difference from town to town, say compared, College Park? Is the housing, is the housing considered less valuable? Is the area less valuable? And there are those differences from town to town. I think, is that still, still it probably is again to a degree, but also that's a factor to consider. How is the town regarded such that with housing and with certain things, that it's going to be a viable place, just like good restaurants and other things? Is that a factor you're considering?
So that is a complicated question that I think I might not be able to answer. I think the priority of this study is to make sure that new housing types respect the existing character of the community, enhance that character, and provide opportunities for the existing residents. So, a missing middle housing types in Bladensburg may look different than Cheverly or wherever, pick a municipality because of the look and feel of that community. And that's a priority for us, is to making sure that, these types, if it gets to a point where they're approved to build, they don't detract from the character that folks in Bladensburg love. And as well, advancing the context of these types, so walkable, amenity-rich environments, that makes everywhere, a nicer place. And whether it's, anywhere in the county you want to pick, when there's people have access to amenities, grocery stores, childcare, all these sorts of things, libraries, that makes our communities better for the people that live there.
But the concept being though that it's fair across the board, all communities looking at as the same and think this community deserves this. This community deserves this too. This community deserves it. I think that's another equity level. That's what it concerns sometimes, that there's an unequal approach to different communities.
Yeah, this is a countywide study as well, so we are looking everywhere across the county. So we're conscious of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. This has been a really good conversation. That's really good. I just wanted to actually tap in to acting chief Fishpoint for a couple minutes to kind of, if anybody has any questions about anything regarding any crime or any issues, because we always kind of have I don't want to say crime time, but let's say police time, where we kind of, if you have questions for the police department, we're here for it. And I just threw them probably under the bus in regards to it, but we do just kind of have a little period of time. If anybody has any questions for the police department at that we do that. So, because we're kind of running into the second hour, and I know that you guys can't be away from work for too long. So, any questions? Yeah.
I'm glad that opportunity came because I do. In fact,
Okay.
I discussed before with Michelle. I would wonder if it's possible to get to, first of all, the approach for ICE. It's in the area, we see it, there's some things going on, and what my concern is with businesses, including Park and Plant, including Bladensburg Community Center. What is the approach for ICE activity? Because it's community center with our, I know we give our classes every Saturday, and we have a very diverse group. And not Park and Planning, but there's really no kind of security there. And sometimes the person who's sitting at the desk isn't even there, he's off on the phone somewhere. So somebody could walk in, ICE could walk, the officers walk in, and we have a very mixed community and a lot of Hispanic folks there. It would be good to know what the policies are of the police department here. I mean, I know you have all sorts of different, I'm sure you have state, you have, county, et cetera, in dealing with that, and also guidelines. And I don't know if businesses are being brought guidelines of how do you deal with it. Like if somebody comes into your business, what do you do? Signage. I mean, I'm involved with Indivisible, Prince George's County and Route 1 corridor. And there are very different trainings, on this about know your rights, documents and things like that. Know your rights, signs you can put up saying, whatever, if you choose. So I guess I'm a little concerned. I'm not saying it's not in top of mind in the police department, but out in this community, it's viable. Look, National Guard, everybody, they're in DC, right? Their actions, I don't know, haven't heard of any, but I don't know if there's something that could come out with it, like links to like know your rights signs that people may put up, and just the training, because I do become a bit concerned because, as I said, somebody could walk in. Now my black belt could fight with somebody, but that's not the point of, so I guess that's it. There's been kind of that building concern, and it's not going away. It's only going away. It's only going to get worse as it's moving on. So there's been more concern about it. So what are your thoughts about this?
We could look at any messaging that we can put out. I haven't really seen a lot of them in the area doing enforcement here. They have been around, like you said, they were up at Prince George's Plaza and in the area, and typically
The
we're not,
thing around Greenbelt, I know as well. Yeah.
typically, we're not gonna be notified and know exactly where they're at because they're out doing their stuff. So our participation with them would be if it's a criminal matter, if, there's a danger to someone, we need to help them with something. Not to do enforcement where we're taking someone into custody on a civil matter where they have a order of deportation, which is something civil. But we most certainly can look into any messaging. And I know there's a lot out there that people could look up on what to do. Typically, if they can't go on the private property. But we could look into messaging just to, for businesses or the residents.
But I think that'd be really good. I have some links I could send to you that you could take a look at because as we know, sometimes there's some places they've gone into, you never know quite when it's going to change. They've gone into schools. There are all sorts of different scenarios. And it's not to make people afraid, but I am concerned that it'd be a targeted big focus to businesses saying, hey, what do you do if somebody, if they show up at your business because this has happened,
And
right?
it's good to say what not to do, not
Yeah.
to,
Right.
do anything that's gonna get yourself
Right.
into problems or
Right.
put the law enforcement in danger that are
Of
doing their
course.
job.
Of course, but I think that would be really good. And others, do you agree that I think it'd be really good for the businesses in town to know, because especially, look, we're a very diverse area. And if some of the targeting that's been approved, it is okay to target people for the color of their skin and if they have an accent or if whatever, there's joking, but my son wasn't exactly, it's kind of approached, but looked up and down when he was in DC, I guess, because he looks as though he could be Mexican or something, because his color of his skin and the way his hair is and stuff. And he said he was being kind of looked up and down, like, monitored. Those people were being monitored. And so it is not to be panicked about. I think that kind of guidance for the businesses, different options they have, and really knowing your rights and knowing how to, not to, like you said, I think that would be a very good idea because, it's out there.
Yeah, I think knowing how not to escalate a situation
Correct.
if you come across.
Yeah, so anything about like de-escalations, the different trains that already are out there, I'll send that to you.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Anybody else with anything for the good of the order? I know that we're getting closer to 1:15. Thank you, Acting Chief, for taking that on for me. No, thank you everybody for being here. we hold these quarterly as a way to kind of exchange information, meet people, kind of understand what's going on in the town. Thank you, Jared, for bringing park and planning out today, because I think that this was a really good conversation that we don't hear more about, and we're gonna start to look at bringing in speakers to kind of have focused topics like this, so that we can share it. Will be shared on the web, on our website for today as well, so that so this presentation is now saved and given out to more people. And I think if there's anything else, I think we can be done for today. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.